Hi, Tim and Taylor.
Which one is Tim and which one is Taylor?
I'm Taylor. Nice to meet y'all.
Nice to meet you. We'll get started in just a minute. We still have a couple minutes.
Sure thing.
Brian, I do have Facebook Live pulled up here because as comments come in, I'm going to be entering those into the discussion when it's appropriate.
Okay.
And at this point, we're not Facebook Live yet, so we're kind of going to wait on that. There's always a delay between what we're really seeing and Facebook Live.
And Facebook. All right. I've got 5:29 according to my clock.
Mhm.
So we're still a minute away.
Yeah.
Now, Linda, where will we see the Facebook comments?
You won't unless you have another device, perhaps with another window open with Facebook coming up at you. You're going to rely on myself and Sean to feed those to you auditorily. We'll read them out loud to you.
Okay. And I have 5:30 p.m.
Mhm.
So my name's Brian Stevens. I'm the chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals. And with us, we have Daryl Owens from Town Council. He is sitting in our meeting and he is now going to be on all of our meetings. And I'm going to allow the other board members to introduce themselves. So we could go ahead and start.
I'm Sally Germer.
Scott, you're muted.
Sorry. I am Scott Clark.
I'm Phil LaFountain.
And you are Taylor, I don't have your last name, Burgess?
Taylor Burgess, lead pastor with Cross Community Church. And this is Tim Rentz with me. Tim has served as one of our elders and he's working with us within our church as we pursue building project.
Okay, great. And I think you all know Linda Bridges.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I appreciate Linda Bridges. I've served on different commissions with her and she's tremendous.
Yeah, I've known Linda from back when she was in Kappa.
That's right. We did ghost tours together.
Yes, we did. So our first order of business is we need to approve the meetings from our July 1, 2019 meeting. Is there a first on that?
I make a motion.
Before we get into the minutes, well, in speaking of the minutes from the last meeting, I'd like to make a note for the record that I believe the sign that was actually built by that company did not meet the standard of code for which was a landscape wall brand. I believe it was a freestanding sign that they actually built with a small little hole in the middle of it. There's probably something that maybe we need to talk about after this meeting because I don't want to take away from this meeting. But that is something that we definitely need to address because I don't think it met the intent of what was approved that they could do when they shook their head and nod that they would do it, what was recommended.
Yeah. Phil, what I remember, I had to leave early. What I remember though was kind of a three-sided planner that looked to be about 10 by 10. And this certainly doesn't look like that. So I agree with you.
You know, it was, and again, I'm not trying to absorb this meeting, but it was a planner that was approved and they agreed on, and they built a frame sign with a hole in the middle of it. That's my opinion on that, but definitely something that we probably need to address. I believe I shot everybody the photos of it, but again, maybe for discussion after we get into the bulk of the meeting.
Yeah, I would agree. Linda, do you agree with?
Yes, certainly. I've made a note. If we want, well, I'm trying to think through just the protocol here. It's not on the agenda, and we don't have a sort of catch-all in our agendas for any new business or any old business to be discussed. I think maybe what staff would like to do is to hold a workshop with this zoning board. We can do that without a published agenda or anything like that. It's just a learning process, a chance for all of us to air how we feel about it. So if you think it's appropriate and enough, I would like to offer that staff following this meeting will put an effort together to get us all together again on a Zoom call in a workshop type setting to talk about the deficits that we've obviously seen here.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, all right.
And-
So
In the
having
meantime,
said
Mr.
that,
Chairman, I think
Linda, does our motion to approve the minutes need to include what you just said, or do we just need to approve the minutes? Or do we not approve the minutes? Or actually, I think the minutes are correct. I don't know about what everybody else thinks. It's the application of the design that we have an issue with. So how do we handle that?
Ideally, we would have had a first to approve the minutes. We would have had a second before we started discussion. The chairman would have asked for discussion on the motion, and we could have launched into exactly what we did. So that would have been pure Robert's rules, a way of handling that. Because none of us is perfect. We have a first, perhaps a second, and then a discussion to reiterate what we just said.
So Sally gave the first, is that?
That's correct.
That's what I recorded. Does
Okay.
everybody agree?
And then I second.
Okay,
And then do we need to have a discussion?
Mr. Chair, to the point that I think we're all talking, we've all heard about, I'd like to make a recommendation that staff put together a workshop for this group to talk about the results of let's see, that would be, I believe, the March meeting. Yes. So that we can all talk about how we feel about what we finally got out of our granting of a variance there.
Actually, Linda, I agree with you. I just caught a typo in the minutes.
Okay,
Line item 2 actually has approved minutes from the meeting of July 1, 2019.
yes. We had a meeting sooner than that.
It's correct above March 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think
I
it's
will make that,
a minor.
as
correction.
you see, this is draft, so we will make those changes.
We're good. And I would agree, so we need a motion for the workshop, correct? This is new to me.
I don't think so. I think that we just need to have that as an action item moving
Okay.
forward.
All right.
Direct staff to do that.
Okay. And then next on the agenda for today,
Well, we do need a vote though.
All
on-
in favor? All in favor?
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Going around the screen, Brian Stevens voted,
Aye.
Scott Clark voted,
Aye.
Sally Germer voted.
Aye.
Phil LaFountain voted.
Aye.
Thank you.
Linda, would it help you if we said aye and then our name?
Actually, yeah, yeah, yes, that's sort of the way of our world now.
Okay. All right, next on our agenda is applicant Cross Community Church regarding 1 Hamrick Drive. It's an appeal request, and Mr. Burgess and Mr. Rentz, if you would like to walk us through your request.
Thank you to the board for your willingness to meet with us this evening and for your service to our community. As I shared earlier, my name is Taylor Burgess. I serve as lead pastor of Cross Community, and we're a relatively young church plant. We started early 2017, and we currently meet at the YMCA on Sunday mornings, and we have definitely found home in Port Royal and want to be in Port Royal long-term. And so over the last few months, opportunity at 1 Hamrick Drive was presented to us with the challenge being the current zoning not allowing for the square footage that we would need to build facilities. So throughout this process, we currently do have the property under contract, and but that contract is contingent on the zoning questions. And so what we've kind of come to is each party that's involved has had a bit of a concern with the rezoning. The neighborhood had a number of concerns about what would happen if that property moved up multiple zones and then we chose not to develop it. What could happen to the property that had them a little bit nervous, understandably. And so we've had very good dialogue with a lot of the surrounding neighbors over the last few months. We met at the home of one of the neighbors with about 10 others that were present. And I know a number of them have written in their support to the town council, to others. We even became aware this past weekend, there was on social media a post that was circulating where a number of neighbors were asking for support as well. And but the neighbors did have the concern about moving up multiple zones. Of course, we had the concern of not wanting to purchase a property that we couldn't develop as we need to. And so the question came up early on about the potential of pursuing a deed restriction that would restrict the use of the property to church only if it moved up multiple zones. So the seller went in to research this, but his attorney had concerns about that, because then if he had deed restricted the property, the sale fell through, he would be stuck with a property that he couldn't turn around and sell. And then, as we understand it, based on a workshop meeting with the town council mentioned that if we were to upzone this property and then not develop it, that they might not be able to turn back around and downzone it due to the potential of being held legally liable for devaluing the property. So through the research, we were able to see in the current zoning that it does allow for building of a church building, but only under 5,000 square feet. So our specific request is that we be granted a variance that would allow us as a church to develop above the 10,000 square feet that would be required in the larger zone. And so that's where that stands right now. All the parties that have been involved have responded to that favorably, from the seller to the neighbors, for us as well. And it seems like something that everyone can get on board with. The neighbors we've been involved with, the meeting we have with the town council, it seemed to be consensus that a church makes sense at this property, as opposed to a number of other efforts that have been previously attempted at this property where the neighborhood did have concerns. So from the beginning, we've had good dialogue. We believe this is very positive for that particular neighborhood, and obviously is a positive for us, being just a few minutes from where we currently meet on Sunday morning. So Tim is going to take just a second here, and he's going to walk just step by step through why we believe a variance is a good fit here as well.
Yeah, I went through, Linda sent, the staff report. And when I was going through that, there's certain questions that, the variance board has to answer before they can, approve. And so what I thought I'd do is kind of walk us through those 5. The first one is, is there necessary hardship? This property is going to require muck and fill. And by the time we get out the bad material and put in good material, it's going to be almost a 4-foot lift right where the building's going. Also, the soil, to the best of our knowledge, will not perk for a septic tank required for a church. So that means we got to put in a lift station and go down to the Montessori school. Probably, I don't know, half a mile or so, a quarter mile, half a mile down the road. Our contractor is thinking that it's going to be $750,000 or more just to get the site where we can build. And with that cost, you cannot you can't really afford to build a small building when you have that much in your infrastructure. One of the issues that the neighbors had was when you take this amount of money, which for a subdivision would be more because it'd be a bigger area that you're filling, it required the owner or, to maximize the density, which would put in a lot of, day trip miles or, coming and going during the peak hours, which, they've already got issues trying to get out of there sometimes during the peak hours. So that's, that answers that question. Does it apply to other property? To my knowledge, Port Royal does not have a similar parcel of property around this neighborhood. So it would not apply to any other piece. Does it prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property? The large cost of development would require extensive utilization of the property. The neighbors do not want traffic from 35 houses, and a small church cannot afford to develop. Same thing I said before. Would it be a substantial detriment to the adjacent property? I think the overwhelming support of the neighbors, we had support of the municipal planning board, and we also had support from town council. So I think, the support that we have to do this kind of answers that question. Would it extend physically a non-conforming use of the land? And, basically churches are allowed in this, on this site now. What we're requesting is to, make it a larger building, which the neighbors, do not object to.
How many square feet are you proposing?
We do have, it's in the packet we submitted. This is all very conceptual for us early on. The architectural site plan at phase 1 calls for about 15,000 square feet. And then long term, if the church was just to really continue growing, we needed additional space. There is a phase 2 that proposes an additional 26,500. So again, initially right now we're looking at phase 1, but the group of neighbors we met with, we did show them this site plan to let them see, hey, this is long-term, what ultimately could go there. So that's obviously we don't fit within the current square footage, which is why we have the request for variance for greater square footage, because we do anticipate it would need to be substantially more than what the current zoning allows.
Understood. Yeah, and I saw your site plan. It was kind of small, so I needed you to
No
kind of
problem.
elaborate there.
Pastor Burgess, anything else?
I think that mostly covers, again, we want to communicate. We really believe this is just a church makes sense at this property. It's a positive addition. Again, there's a lot to be determined about the site prep as we get in there, but we love the location of this property. We are Cross Community Church on purpose. We're very actively involved in a number of fronts across the community. I'm on the board with the YMCA and intend to continue serving the YMCA as best as possible. We love Port Royal. We love the community. Love that location, and so would greatly appreciate your support as we pursue this evening in granting the variance.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I've got two issues that I wanted to bring up. The first one is the unnecessary hardship. As I read it from our comprehensive planning guide for local governments that we're all bound by, to obtain a variance on the grounds of unnecessary hardship, there must at least be proof that a particular property suffers a singular disadvantage through the operation of the zoning regulation. Singular disadvantage means it only applies to you. The points that you just made earlier about bringing in a lift of 4 feet to get it out of floodplain applies to anybody on the property is going to have that same issue. So that's not a singular use, and cost can never be used as a hardship. Concerning unnecessary hardship, I don't believe that we proved unnecessary hardship, but my bigger issue is that of legal authority. This is really, and you even said it in your letter and said it just now, this is really nothing more than a rezoning from T3 SN to T4 NCO. And zoning, unfortunately, is a legislative power. It's provided by the state as a legislative power. This board does not have the legal authority to approve a variance of changing density. And that's even further been mandated by Linda's instructions to us, which state that, and I quote, "The board cannot grant a variance to increase density of use above that permitted by the applicable zoning." So that's the board's biggest issue that we have. And I would also like to discuss the whole deed restriction issue that you brought up, because I think there's the way I understand it, and I've kind of got a background in this, a deed restriction can be set up to where it is not recorded until the closing. So you can write that deed restriction that says once the property is upzoned to the T4 NCO, and you close on the property as Cross Community Church, then the property has a deed restriction that only a church can be built on that property. When you go back to your letter, which was very well written, by the way, that all of those concerns that you had, that the neighbors had, that you had, and that the seller had, go away because there's a deed restriction in place and you own the property. So he doesn't have to worry about having a deed restriction on something that he's then got to try to sell. You own the property, so you can do as you please with it. And the neighbors are happy with that because they want a church on the property. So I would like to throw out an idea for discussion to the board, that we consider tabling this motion or this matter so that all parties can determine a solution that's acceptable to all of the parties. And sending it back to council where it legally has to go.
Linda? Is that
Yes.
true? Is that true?
I'm not certain 100%.
I thought we were appeals, zoning appeals.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, you are the zoning board of appeals, but you hear both appeals to my decisions and variances to the code. There are two different actions that can come forward out of this board. If the applicant doesn't agree with perhaps what I say, they can come to you and say, she's wrong here. Let me show you why. You can override my decision. That's an appeal. A variance is what we're dealing with here today. We all agree that the code says what the code says, that T3 suburban does not allow a structure greater than
5,000 square feet.
5,000 square feet.
I was going to ask you for the staff report next.
And so, so consequently, what we're looking for here today is a variance. Some background. Brian, Mr. Chairman, you just mentioned that you were going to ask for the staff report. Perhaps this would be a good time before I finish this answer, if I could lay some groundwork for
Yes,
this
please.
issue with the staff report. The applicant is Cross Community Church. The site is 1 Hamrick Drive. That's also known as R11233B, parcel 90A, parcel 138, and a portion of parcel 137. Parcels are zone T3 suburban. From the Port Royal Code, I supplied to you the page that shows us our use that we're dealing with, which is a meeting facility or a place of worship. It is allowed, as the applicant has pointed out to you, meeting place and places of worship are allowed in all of our transect zones that allow development. It's not allowed in T1, which is natural preserve, but all the T3s, all the T4s, and the T5 allow a place of worship or a meeting facility. The difference between the zoning designations as we move through those Ts is the size that's allowed. This property at T3 doesn't allow more than 5,000 square feet. There are zoning designations that allow 10,000 square feet. I think that is really the long and the short of the background information. There are some exhibits that were provided to you to show you exactly where the property is, and again, to show you that zoning table. In addition to what went out into your packets, I've been advised by legal counsel that we do need to let the applicant know that there was some ex parte communication within the board. So some of the, there were some email communications that basically, thank you, Scott, you summarized them very well. We were made aware that the things that Scott has said tonight were also placed into an email to all of us. So full disclosure, that happened. In addition, I have, in advance of the meeting this evening, received comments from some neighbors, and I could read those into the record right now, Mr. Chair, or however you want to take those. That's a sort of a different classification.
Yes, please go ahead and read them.
Okay.
Stop doing
all
this
right.
on Zoom.
Yes. First one that I've received, Ms. Bridges, I am writing on behalf of me and my husband, Joe Simpson. We ask that you please share this with the board members. We live at 505 Hamrick Drive, directly across from the Hamrick Hill property that's being discussed before the Zoning Board of Appeals tonight. Joe and I strongly support the Cross Community Church's request for a variance to allow their proposed structure to exceed the current limits. We do this in full understanding of what the current limits are and what they are requesting. I've grown up in the Shell Point neighborhood. Many of my family members own houses and live in this neighborhood. Dozens of friends live here too. My husband and I chose to buy a home and stay in this area. This is a good family community. Over the past several years, the Hamrick Hill property has been the topic of much discussion, and most of this discussion was previously not good, all caps, for the area, the landscape, or the people. When we learned of the small church wanting to purchase the land, a group of active neighbors engaged in conversation about the possibility. We took our concerns to the leaders of the church, and they brought their intentions and plans. They listened, they were transparent. It started a conversation where people were heard and a positive solution was identified. The area across from our home is beautiful. We fully realize that it is not going to stay pristine forever. The previous plans by the current owner were to insert duplexes and/or try for mansion apartments that quite possibly could have been low income. The past proposal had very limited green space, no consideration for the neighboring homes and streets. This does not fit the Shell Point community. A small family-friendly church with modest plans for their congregation would be a great solution for this particular location. It is my understanding that the sale of the property to the church would benefit from this variance being approved. Joe and I ask you to look at this property, this variance request, and the entire situation as if it were on your street. We fully support this request and ask for your consideration in doing the same. For additional comments and questions, we can be reached at an email or cell below. If needed, I'm happy to write each board member individually if email addresses are provided. So that was from Deanna and Joe Simpson. Also received from another neighbor, Zoning Board of Appeals. We strongly support the variance request for Cross Community Church to build a building larger than the current zoning. We reside at Lot 6 of the Hamrick Hill subdivision, and the property in question is in our backyard. This variance is a win-win for the community and the church. Under the current zoning, a property owner could develop up to 40 duplexes on this property. Even if those lots were 1/4 acre lots, the runoff from the roof surfaces alone can be combined to 174,240 square feet, not accounting for driveways, sidewalks, and roads. And with the normal 2 vehicles per household, the traffic congestion would increase greatly. Cross Community Church should be granted this variance since their building has a minimal environmental impact on the community, adds to the social well-being, and traffic will be minimal to the neighborhood. Rezoning to a T4 neighborhood center open zone is the only other option that puts the neighborhood in jeopardy, as that zoning allows for schools, retail stores, restaurants, bars, nightclubs, gas stations, and hotels. Then, if for some unforeseen reason the sale fails, or if the applicant is not able to construct their church, as happened with hospice in the past, and that was on this property, they're bringing up some history that they know about from nearly 10 years ago, and then is forced to sell the property, it would devastate the neighborhood. We do not support any rezoning of this property. Please approve this variance request. Very respectfully, Deborah and John Kazalka. From Facebook, Deanna Bright Simpson chimed in again. Please consider the variance for this property and this church. The closing is scheduled soon, and this property has been in limbo for several years. Neighbor here on Hamrick Drive. Gail Jolly, this property has been in dispute since it was annexed by Port Royal in the 90s, by line of sight surrounded by the county. First low-income apartments, then hospice, then duplexes, mansion apartments, and finally we have something that we as neighbors can support. Please approve this variance request. Mr. Chair, I think that is all we have as oh, I know what I wanted to say as a staff report. I do want to bring up some history. The board member, Mr. Clark, has brought up the idea or the stipulation that perhaps this is a zoning question and something for town council. And just for, again, full disclosure to everyone, it has been to town council, and town council asked that the applicant try this path for a variance. We as staff do not stand in the way, nor should we stand. We've been advised that we should not stand in the way of an applicant who wants to get to this board. That's their right. Their right also is to stand before you and have you look at the merits of their arguments, discuss the merits of their arguments, and make a decision. And I think that's, you know, that's where we are on that issue this evening. I'd be glad to answer any questions that I can here.
Let me, I'd like to add some, in that I'm in support of the church going there. It's not a matter of anybody on this board not supporting the church, but it's legally what we are authorized to do and what we are not authorized to do as this body that is being presented to. And I will read in our limitations as board members in this type of a board. The board may not grant a permit, the effect of which would be of any of the following, and I'll read all four if you want, but one of them specifically is to increase the density of use above the permitted by applicable zone, meaning that it is zoned as a T3, we as a board are not authorized to go above that 5,000 for the purpose of the density. So that is a very striking thing that concerns me. And then if we voted on this, if we did vote in favor of this as a yes, legally that might put the town in a unique situation that I don't have the answer to, but specifically on our limitation says we are not even allowed to give a variance case. So that is concerning, and I for all of the neighbors that want this, I would really want this too. I mean, if I was in that neighborhood and having a shopping mall or anything else, but how do we even vote on something like this when it says we're not even allowed to give a variance for something like this? And that's very concerning.
And I think,
Mr.
I
Chair.
think I agree with what Phil just said. I'm in support of the churches as well. And the good news is there is a path to success here for you guys. And that path to success is what was stated in your letter, which is rezone the property, do a deed restriction at closing that goes into effect at closing that limits it to a church. And that solves all of the problems and is the legal way to go about doing that. You know, I'll just read another excerpt from the comprehensive planning guide. It says a use variance may be subject to attack as an unlawful delegation of legislative authority. Zoning is a legislative power in the state. Uses permitted in a zoning district are listed in zoning ordinances, districts, and regulations. In effect, granting a use variance amends the ordinance administratively for the benefit of one landowner. Paraphrasing, it's per this, it's illegal to do what's called in real estate, it's called rezoning by variance, and it's an illegal operation. And I've confirmed this with two attorneys that specialize in rezonings, and 2 civil engineers that specialize in zoning matters. So I feel really confident in what I'm saying.
Mr. Chairman, as staff, it's not my job to interject ideas, but I do feel strongly that I have just one clarification, well, perhaps two. I think the applicant has pointed out that the use is allowed in both, in any zoning designation that we have. So I would just bring that point forward again, not advocating one way or the other, just making certain that we all heard that the use is allowed, the use of a meeting facility or place of worship is allowed in all of our T zones. I would, because it is kind of my world and I am the unique person sitting here, to the question of density. Density in the zoning world perhaps does not quite mean what I think is being talked about here. To that point, I made certain that I brought a zoning dictionary to the table this evening so that I could read what density is. In the zoning world, density is, among other things, forwardly stated, the number of dwelling units per net acre of land. Another submission in the document says the number of dwelling units per acre, the number of dwelling units situated on or to be developed on a net acre or a gross acre. So for our world, whenever we see zoning administrators, whenever we see the word density, we think about how many units per acre, or whether it's net or gross. Those are the details that are always followed up with the zoning designation. So I wonder, in this case, are we not talking about intensity as opposed to density? Density being people per square mile, people per square acre, houses per square acre, something along residential things, as opposed to the request, which is to create an environment that is more intense than zoning allows. And I think that, again, the applicant has pointed out the uniqueness of the property is that it's 15 acres, 13 point something acres owned by one person, by one entity in a residential subdivision. The reason the color of the map is the way it is, the way that it was zoned the way it was by council, is because by and large, that light pink color is splayed over the zoning map, which is single family residential subdivision. And in the midst of it, we have this unique piece of land, it is 15 acres. The current owner is retaining some of that acreage. They're selling 13 something acres to these folks. I would add that as my staff report. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. I do have a couple of questions, and I don't know if you can answer this. So they want to go to T4, and I think this property is very close to the bylaw on Rebo Road. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is there a T4 zone adjacent to this property or across the street?
Yeah, I do know the answer to that. No, across the street and around it is Beaufort County, unincorporated Beaufort County. But in 2012 through 2014, Beaufort County and the town of Port Royal worked on a new zoning code which the desired result of was that we had a language that was similar between the two codes. So what we call T3 suburban neighborhood, the county calls T3 hamlet, I believe it is. And so on 3 sides of the property, we have a zoning very similar, although nomenclature is different because of jurisdictions. On the north of the property, that property is in Beaufort County, unincorporated Beaufort County also, and it is still zone T3. It's a bump up, what we would call a darker pink T3 neighborhood, and the county has a similar nomenclature on it. It is past that piece of property, which is privately owned, past the park before we get to T4 zoning, which is Bilo, the apartment complex, the storage units, all of those items, some of which are zone T4 neighborhood center open, which is, I believe, what council heard in the last couple of months as a request.
Okay.
Can
So
I-
it's not light of sight, not walk across the street. Got it.
Right, yeah, it's a ways off.
And then the other question I have is to my knowledge, this property sits, it's a 2-lane road that leads out onto Rebo Road. Has anybody taken into account what, because the additional traffic after services pulling out onto Rebo Road, because that could be an issue without a light.
I'll let the applicants answer also. For background information, both Broad River Road, which is the immediate road that this will face, and then that comes on, empties on to Paris Island Gateway. These are both South Carolina Department of Transportation roads. So if this development were to be given a green light, they would be, the town would expect them to show us how satisfied South Carolina Department of Transportation is with their plan. They will need to get an encroachment permit probably from SCDOT. And that would answer that question perhaps. Remember that the lay of the land, if you took a left out of the property, you would eventually get to a light.
Mhm.
The light at Savannah Highway and Paris Island Gateway.
Right. That's a long drive though.
It is. Yes. Yes, it's not the most direct route.
Can we go to Exhibit B really quick? If everybody can kind of focus on that. And listening to what you said, Linda, the definition of density, what does that really mean per square foot or whatnot? I mean, that information is not in Exhibit B. The interpretation in Exhibit B talks about places of worship. So that is the concern. The documents that I have in front of me is the documents that I have to help make a decision on today. And I would like to believe Exhibit B is factual information, and it specifically says that 5,000 square foot are the only possible, 5,000 square foot is the allowable allowance for T3, all the T3 zonings.
Yes.
For that specific type of for a place of worship. It addresses that specifically. So legally going back under Exhibit B, that is density. And maybe density could be looked at several different ways, but according to that document that we are supposed to use as a zoning board, that means density for that specific type of building. And the proposal is to go above 10,000 square foot to a 15,000 square foot. And then potentially if the church grows, then it would, if they go to phase 2, then it goes to 25,000. My other concern about that is you're going 4 times the size of what was originally authorized for a T3 area. And I'm just not sure about that. And I believe that Exhibit B is telling us for a place of worship what density is. That's the purpose of the square foot.
And Linda, one other thing, I appreciate your comments about a church being a permitted use. That I agree with. But the way I interpret the principal uses allowed in each zoning classification that you gave us, table that you gave us, specific use goes on to more than just a church. It goes on to a place of worship under 5,000 square feet, a place of worship between 5,000 square feet and 10,000 square feet, and a place of worship greater than 10,000 square feet. So it's more than just a church. Church is allowed, yes, but it goes into detail under specific uses for each of those zoning classifications. Once again, I just don't think we can approve this legally. And fortunately, I just don't think we have to. I think the right thing to do is to send it back to the town so that they can rezone it, do a deed restriction, close on the property. So, do that at the same time.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything to add?
Comment?
Yes, sir.
May I make a comment?
Sure.
As far as the deed restriction goes, it's a little bit more complicated than, what has been discussed. According to the contract, the owner is going to take a mortgage out to help us purchase the property. And with that mortgage in place, the attorney still doesn't like the idea of putting a deed restriction because, if we close, but we don't pay the mortgage off, then the current owner is still in a very bad situation. If we do rezone and we do close on the property, and the way we've been blessed, our giving is held steady, but if the economy tanked and things got really bad, then the rezoning would leave the church in a very bad situation, because then we would have to downzone, and we don't know what that would be downzoned to. So that's creating a big risk factor for the church. If we knew we could downzone to what we are today, then that's not a problem. But I've been around zoning for probably 30 years. I was involved with the county when they first started the rezoning. And I know that, when you downzone, you could get downzoned significantly below where it is now. So that would be creating a big risk for the church also.
Why do you feel like you couldn't downzone? You can always do a use lower in classification than your zoning. You just can't go above that. So why would you need to downzone?
Yes, you can. We could downzone, but the problem is, what does it downzone to? The neighbors are not happy with the current zoning. So if we had to, 5 years from now, because of the economy, have to sell the property, it'd either have to be purchased by a church, or it would have to be downzoned. Well, issue for the church is what level does it get down zoned to? And the neighbors aren't happy where we are now. So there's a very real possibility if it was down zoned, it would be down zoned for less than what it can currently be used for.
I'm not following that. The way I interpret the table under residential, permitted uses for T3 SN is single family detached unit, 2-family unit, accessory dwelling, a group home, and that's it. The multifamily unit is specifically prohibited in the current zoning. So they couldn't do under the current zoning T3 SN, and Linda, please confirm or tell me I'm wrong here, but if I read the table correctly, there's a dash under multifamily, which means if you go down to the key, it says prohibited use. So they can't do a townhome complex there or an apartment complex. It's not allowed.
That's not my concern. My concern is if we have to downzone, what's going to keep it from being downzoned to T1 NP or T3 Edge? We may not, if we have to rezone 5 years from now, and the fact that the neighbors don't like the current zoning, we may be forced to accept a lower zoning designation than what, where it is currently, which would devalue the property, and based on development costs, it could almost render it undevelopable.
Again, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to understand why you would want to downzone something when you have a higher zoning classification and you can always build anything you want underneath that zoning classification. You wouldn't have to downzone is what I'm suggesting. If you're rezoned up to T4 NCO, you can build anything from T4 NCO down, anything you want without rezoning anything.
All right, but we will have a deed, if we get rezoned, we are going to have a deed restriction on the piece of property that says only a church can be developed under, the T4 designation. So if the church can't build the building and we need to sell the property, nothing else under that T4 NCO can be built.
No, anything under that T4 NCO could be built.
Under a deed restriction.
Huh?
With a deed restriction saying that only a church will go there.
That's correct. Any church under any church could go on the property based on the zoning classifications.
I think that's part of the concern, is that it restricts, if we had to resell the property, the deed restriction would restrict us to only being able to sell to another church. And that's the big risk that's involved, for us in particular, is that if something happens, again, everything looks great right now and we're in a very strong position to do it, but there's a lot of uncertainty on the horizon right now. And so it unfortunately does. I mean, I completely agree with what you've said in terms of, wanting to take, obviously, the legal route here with pursuing deed restriction that could resolve the issues. It just presents a lot of risk, in that we could ultimately just be saddled with the deed restricted property that we can't really do anything with return. So that's the main concern, is just having a deed restricted property, and that very much limiting what we could do with it if we had to go a different direction.
Understood.
Yeah, I guess buying property has its inherent risks that
Sure.
You know, it's just like with my property, the property that I own. If things go to hell in a handbasket and I would have to sell, I would have the same concerns you did. But my problem that I have is this board, the way I interpret everything and the way I've gotten counsel from attorneys and civil engineers, we don't have an option. We cannot approve this. That's my concern.
Understood.
Okay.
So I that's back to my suggestion of tabling it. That I see that as, at this point, your path to success, because the result here, while I don't know what the outcome of an up or down vote would be, my guess is that it would be denied, and then you're really in a bad position. If we table it, it gives both parties the opportunity to get together. And when I say really all three parties, the town, the seller, and you guys, to get together and figure out the best way to do this. And at least you have another shot at making this work. And I'm confident that you could figure something out. Whereas if we do an up or down vote today, the decision is, it would be detrimental. You could still go back and do a rezoning if you choose to, but it would be detrimental to your case because you've got a denial as precedent. So I don't know. That's just my view on things.
Well, if it's tabled, I would like to see a reason being given for it being tabled. That way, if we go to council, we don't end up with the same thing of them tabling it because it needs to come back to your group. If that makes sense.
It sure does. And I can craft the motion to include the reason we can't offer an opinion on this is because we're not legally obligated or authorized to do so. And I can also, put in there language about what my suggestion is as far as how to get to a path of success on this thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to remand or table the application for a period of 60 days to allow the parties to negotiate the terms of a rezoning and deed restriction or other terms acceptable to the parties involved based on a lack of legislative authority to authorize this variance.
Second that.
And that's Phil who seconds.
Yes, Philip Fountain seconds.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Sally Grimmer says aye.
Brian Stevens says aye.
Scott Clark says aye.
Philip Fountain says aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Board,
We need to adjourn.
Scott, it appeared, Scott, it appeared that perhaps you read that motion. And
Yes.
if I could, just for completeness, if you could shoot me a copy, if it's just a picture, that'd be great.
Okay. Do
So
you
that I
want
can
me
put
to?
it
I
into the
kind of
record.
added to it at the end about the
Okay.
unauthorized.
Well, I am recording it. I have a
Okay.
voice recording also.
Do
So I
you-
think we'll
If you
get
would
there.
like, Linda, I can, after we get off the call, I can send you an email. Should I send it to the board or just to you?
Just to me, because it will go, the board will see it as draft minutes as it goes
Okay.
forward.
Okay, I can send that to you when we're off.
Okay. Mr. Chair, we still have the order on variance application. This is our obligation. I think I've never been in a zoning board of appeals meeting with a table. So,
Our applicant dropped off the line.
yes, I see that. But we're still Facebook Live. So we're still broadcasting to the general public.
Linda, sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
we didn't do an up or down vote, so do we?
That's where I was going. That's where I was going, Scott. It may be, I think as I process this, that because you tabled for 60 days, we're going to reconvene this body in 60 days, period.
Mhm.
And we're going to either get a report from council or from the applicant or someone. So I don't think, even though general order of business is to complete the order of variance application at the after motion is taken with this board, I think the open-endedness of this and nature of the motion, it kind of moves this process down the road a bit. So my advice would be to hold off on working on the order on variance application. Y'all recognize that? That's the last page in your
Yes,
package
ma'am.
every time I see it. Where we say it does or does not have this or doesn't do that. So I think that we can push that away until the 60-day period is over. We will have to convene to bring this issue off of the table, if for nothing more than to bring it off the table and continue our discussion. Does that
Linda, is that even
all sound
if council
professional?
if council takes the matter up, do we still have to meet? Is that necessary just to close it, or do you know?
I don't know. I will say that I'm not sure. On the surface of it, because it is a motion to table, I would think that specifically stating the 60 days, I think that means that this board has to convene within 60 days to discuss it again.
Should I?
It may
redo
be.
The reason
No.
I did the 60 days was
You
No,
can't.
no.
It's already out there. We
It's
already
much-
voted.
okay.
Yeah, and it's much better. Actually, your 60 days is something, having an end date is something that's very specific and very much in order with Robert's Rules of Order. A lot of folks make motions to table and never say, oh, we're going to take this up and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
No, that is a very good motion. You made a very complete motion that has all the necessary parts in it. So, basically, I guess I'm going to let you off the hook for the order of variance of application, and we'll see how the applicant moves forward.
So as this process goes on over the next 60 days, I know that council's going to have to deal with this again. Very much would be important, obviously, to get maybe not just one, but a couple lawyers' opinions on the legality of this variance. Because if it comes back and they say, well, actually legally you can do it and you can make it happen for these folks, obviously we want attorneys involved on that, because legally we don't want to put the town in jeopardy, just like the council does not want to put the town in jeopardy over a decision. So that's very important. It's very important for that to be transparent for us to see when we're making a decision and as this process goes on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, guys, we probably need to hold off on any additional conversation since the other party has dropped off the line. I understand we're Facebook streaming, but the other party's not here to hear what we're saying, so.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes, I motion to adjourn.
A second.
All in favor, say aye.
Sally
Scott
Germer
says
says
aye.
aye.
Brian
Philip
Stevens says aye.
aye.
Thank you.